I'm going to show you now how to manipulate the DOM elements using ElementRef. In this case, what I want is to manipulate the input where I introduce the number of seconds of a new timer, this one. ElementRef is a reference of a component you can get using viewChild or contentChild. So I'm going to create a property timeInput of type ElementRef using this decorator. Below my viewChildren, I write this at viewChild called timeInput that is going to be type ElementRef. And of course I have to import ElementRef and also the viewChild decorator I am using. At this point you can see my linter complaining, and that's because timeInput cannot be created because it doesn't know what element from the view has to be associated with. So I go to my app component, and in my app.viewInput I'm going to create a template reference variable, timerInput. In fact, I can give it any name, but the point is that back in my component code, now I can tell my viewChild to find the element with this ref as a reference to my timeInput. Okay, I want to console log this property in order to see how does it look like. As before, this content is available in the afterViewInit lifecycle event, so I can go to the method ngAfterViewInit in order to console log it. So console log of this.timeInput. I save this and go to the browser to see the console output. As you can see here, there's an ElementRef with the property NativeElement and several classes. Opening the ElementRef, you can see the NativeElement property, and inside it there's a lot of methods and properties. NativeElement is an Angular abstraction of the specific node of the DOM associated with an element. Thanks to NativeElement, you can manipulate the DOM and do stuff like adding or removing classes or attributes to that node, or even use methods of that element. I'm going to show you some examples on how to do it. So, back to app component ES in ngAfterViewInit, what I will do is to add an attribute. For example, I can add a placeholder to my input in case it have no content. Below the console log, I write this.timeInput.NativeElement, that is the property representing my input. And now I can use the method setAttribute and pass the attribute name placeholder, so you can use HTML standard attributes. And then the text I want to show as a placeholder, like enter seconds. Another thing I can do is to add a class dynamically. Add this with this.timeInput.NativeElement, and then in a similar way I can do class list dot and use the method add to add new classes, like the timing class I want to create right now. I open the SAS file to create this class, and below all, after the cancel button, I add .timeIn, and inside I will change a little bit the font style. Font weight, for example, 600. I also add some color, like 9932cc, and finally font size of 12 pixels. If I go to see the results again, and I click the plus button, here's my input with a different color and looking bold. You can see it better with some more numbers. If I remove the content, I can see the enter seconds text, that is the placeholder I added dynamically. If you inspect the element, you can see how the input has this placeholder attribute with the value enter seconds. But remember, I added it by code. Okay, pay attention now. I close and open it again, and it would be really nice, as I'm expected to introduce the amount of seconds. It would be nice the input to be already focused, so you don't have to click on it to start writing every time. I can also do that with my NativeElement. So I go back to the code app component ES, and I look for the method that makes the alert visible, the showAtTimer method. And inside I will call the focus method of my NativeElement, this.timeInput.NativeElement.focus directly. If I move to the browser to see the results, I click the button and there's no focus on my input. Why is this? Well, as I have manipulated the DOM directly, Angular has not detected the changes inside the showAtTimer method, and changeDetectorRef is useless in this case, so the only option I have is to call this inside the timeout function so Angular detects the change. So I write setTimeout, I pass an arrow function, and basically I move the focus call inside the arrow function. I save, and now I can go back to my browser and I can see that focus now is really working. You can see the input is focused. If I close and open it again, the input is focused another time. Let's make a short summary. I wanted to show you how to dynamically manipulate this input from code. So what I did is to create a template reference variable in the input called timerInput that allows me to access this element from TypeScript side. Thanks to the build child decorator, here I store this reference in the timeInput property of type ElementRef. And later, I can use it to access the native element that represents the element in the DOM, to add some attributes, add new classes, or even use the Element API.